Hi, I'm Maggie. Thank you for stopping by Crafts the Charm today. You are very welcome here. Isn't this a beautiful scarf? I bought this ages ago and I haven't worn it as a scarf in a very long time. It's definitely seen better days. It's got some rips in it and areas that I can't repair. But in the last few years, I have used it as a table runner in the winter. It's a good width to be a table runner and it's a good length, and I just love the pattern. I thought with it getting colder, it's a fun time to just sit indoors and knit, and knitting a new table runner with a similar pattern would be a really fun project. Let's go have some fun.
So I've worked out a pattern using a yarn that I don't particularly like the color of, this Smoke from the Dollar Tree. And I just wanted to show you the pattern that we're going to knit in advance. So to start, we cast on 36 stitches, and then the first 2 rows are garter, which means we knit one direction and then we turn it over and we knit again, and that gives us this row of garter. And then there are 4 garter on the front, 2 purl, 6 knit, 2 purl, 8 knit, 2 purl, 6 knit, 2 purl, 4 garter. And you can see the garter gives you a really nice edge. That's why I use the garter. You can see that on each end, the 6 knit are what we're going to cable. And in the middle, with the 8 knit, when we do our cabling, we're going to do a row of garter immediately after. So on the right side, we're going to cable, and then when we turn it over, on the wrong side, we're going to knit. And of course, with knitting, when we purl on the right side, we knit on the wrong side, and vice versa. When we knit on the right side, we purl on the wrong side. So that's just an explanation of the pattern that I've come up with. And then the only other thing is that I thought that I would have the cables pointing in to each other. So for one, we do a cable 3 to the front, and for the other, we do a cable 3 to the back. So I'm going to take this off of my needles. These are my 8mm needles. And I'm going to use a color that I really love, that I want for my table runner. So I have here what we need to complete this project. So I have written out the instructions, and I do have my sort of swatch there that I did in the smoke color. I have my 8mm needles. I have a cabling needle. This is the only size that I have. And then from the Dollar Tree, I have this Just Yarn worsted, and the color is cream. This is my favorite off-white color that the Dollar Tree makes, and I don't often see it. What I had seen recently was a color called Aran, which I've bought and used, but I far prefer this color, so I'm excited to see it again. So we're going to knit 2 strands at a time, and that's going to give us something thicker, which I think is more suitable for decor. So I'm just going to start by making a slip knot out of the 2 strands. Put that over my left needle. And because I don't purl very well in any continental style, I try the Norwegian style. That's the one I hope to master. I'm going to be knitting in the English style here. And I'm going to begin by casting on 36 stitches. And I'm actually going to throw this yarn on the floor. Okay, we're a little closer now. Now I'm going to do a knit cast on, which is not my favorite just because it's a little bit tight, but it's a relatively easy cast on. So you just do as if a knit stitch and then put it back over that original needle. And we're going to cast on 36 stitches in this way. So that's 4. Now we're going to do 2 rows of garter stitch, and that means that we're going to knit the front and the back of the work. Okay, now we're going to do our first row on the front of the work. So we're going to start with 4 knit stitches, and this is going to be our garter edging. Now we do 2 purl stitches, and we're going to have purl stitches on either side of that cable. It just will make the cable stand out a little. So remember, bring the yarn to the front of the work for a purl and go down into the stitch rather than up through the stitch, yarn over, and then pull it off the needle. And we're going to do 2 of those. Now put the yarn back behind the work, and we're going to do 6 knit stitches. This is where our cable is going to go. At any time you're not sure how many stitches you've done, just go back and count. 4 garter, 2 purl, 6 knit. There, we've done it. So we're going to do the other 2 purl. So bring the yarn in front of the work, down into the stitch, yarn over and off the needle. Now we're going to do the middle, which is 8 knit stitches. And I designed this to be relatively flat because I figure on a table, this is where you want to put a vase or a candle or something. Now 2 purl, yarn in front, yarn in back, 6 knit for the cable on the other side, and then yarn in front, 2 more purl, and then yarn in back, 4 knit, and this is the garter edging on the other side. And that's our first front row. And now we're going to do our first back row. So again, we're always going to start with the 4 knit stitches. That gives us that garter edging. But now here, remember on the front of the work, we purled. So that means on the back of the work, we knit. So we knit 2 stitches. Now on the front of the work, we knit 6 stitches, so on the back we purl 6. So yarn in front. Now yarn in back. On the front we had purled 2, so on the back we knit 2. Yarn in front, and we're going to purl 8. Knit 2. Yarn in front and purl 6. yarn in back knit, we're going to knit 6. So we're going to knit the 2 that we purled on the front, and then we're going to knit the 4 edging for the garter. So now we've completed one front row and one back row, and you're going to repeat those. So do another front and back, and then after that we will cable. There, now it's time for us to do a cabling row, and you could certainly change the intervals between cables. This is what the cables are going to look like if you cable now. You could certainly do another 2 rows, front and back, and then cable, and then your intervals would be a little bit longer. But we'll cable now. So we start off the same with 4 knit. And 2 purl. Now for our first cable, we're going to cable 3, holding the cabling needle to the front of the work. So slip 3 stitches onto the cabling needle. Make sure your yarn's in the back of the work and knit 3. And now we're going to knit those 3 stitches off of the cabling needle. Then purl 2. Knit 8. Purl 2. And now we're going to cable again, but in order to get the cable pointing the other way, we're going to hold the needle to the back of the work. So slip 3 stitches. Make sure your yarn's in the back. Knit 3. And then knit those 3 stitches off of your cabling needle. Now finish like before. Purl 2. Knit 4. Now the back of the work is slightly different for this row as well, and easier. So start off the same, we're going to knit 6. We're going to purl 6 where we just cabled, so it might be a little tight. Now we're going to knit 12, and that's going to give us this row of garter. Now we're going to purl 6, and this is where we had knit the cable before, again, so it might be a little tight. And then knit 6. Now you're going to repeat that for the length that you want your table runner to be. Don't repeat the 2 initial rows of garter, but do front, back, and then the front with the cabling, back with the garter, or if you decided to go a little bit longer than this before you cabled, whatever that interval is, repeat. Okay, so I've knit almost 11 sets of the 6 rows. And I'm just coming up at the end of one set of 6, and I have some tails here of my yarn. So I have 2 new skeins, and I'm just going to leave a little tail there that I'll be weaving in, and I'm going to knit this together with those ends. So we've got 3 knit stitches here. 1, 2, 3, and luckily we're right at the end, so it's easy to remember. Ooh, did we drop one? Did I drop one? No, it's my tail, sorry. Okay, so it's easy to remember that we've got some, slightly thicker stitches here to work. Okay, so then when we come around, we're going to take 4 strands there and knit them with our 2 new skeins. And 4 strands. We're going to do this 3 times. And that's a little messy. We'll come back and look at that. 3. Okay, and that's our double strands. And what we'll do with these is we'll poke them through when we finish off the work. So there's our 4, and then the next 2 we purl. Okay, then we're going to knit the next 6. Let's look here. There. Okay, we just want to pull those tight enough so that it isn't quite so messy. Not sure what this one is. I think it might be one of these. Okay, well, that came out a little bit messy. Okay, so these we'll weave in at the end, and these will just poke through so they're on the wrong side. And so this is the back of our work, and we'll just weave those all in at the end, and then we can just continue knitting as usual. So we'll just keep going. So I got about 15 inches of length, and I think, when we iron this or steam this, lock it, I think we're going to have 15 inches of length. So 2 skeins seem to give us 15 inches of length. So we'll see what 30 inches looks like when we're done with these, and then decide if we want to do more. Now, I'm almost done knitting my second 2 skeins of yarn, and I've decided that I would like to add another 2 skeins because that will give me the length that I want for this runner. But before I start knitting with these last 2 skeins of yarn, I want to cut off some pieces of the yarn for fringe. So I will remove whatever yarn I need to give me fringe at both ends of my table runner, and then I'll use the rest of the skeins to knit with. That way I don't have to worry about leaving some yarn at the end for the fringe. I'll already have the fringe ready to use. I just held the yarn up against the end of the scarf to figure out how long I wanted the pieces to be. I decided about a 2-inch fringe would look good, so I cut lengths that were about 4 inches. You have to account for a little bit extra for where it's going to sort of knot to the scarf. As you know, our scarf is 36 stitches, so we're going to want twice that, or 72 pieces of yarn to use for the fringe. So I'm just going to measure those roughly, I'm not being too careful, and cut them off, try to cut them off both of these skeins evenly, and then I will start knitting with these just like I did before when I started knitting with the other 2 skeins, and continue until I'm ready to bind off. Now I'm very near to the end of my last 2 skeins, and I'm almost done. I really should have left enough here so that I could do 2 rows of garter, so 2 rows where I knit both the front and the back, but I didn't quite have enough. So what we're going to do is knit 1 row of garter, which means we just do 1 complete set of knit stitches all the way across, and then we're going to bind off. The reason I didn't leave myself enough to do 2 rows of garter is because I was really hoping I would be able to do a complete set of rows at the end after a cabling row. So I wanted to do a cabling row and then give myself just a good 4 rows so that it matched the other end, but I wasn't able to do that. So I'm hoping nobody's going to be comparing the ends of this table runner very closely, but if you want to make yours more even, then I would say just finish once you reach once you're ready to do a cabling row. Don't do that cabling row. Instead, do your 2 rows of garter and then bind off. So after our row of garter stitch, or 1 complete row where we just do the knit stitch, we're going to bind off. And to do this, you're going to knit 2 stitches onto your right needle, and then you're going to pull the first stitch over the second. Then knit another stitch, pull the first stitch over the second, and continue until the very end. You're going to be left with a loop. Put your yarn through that loop and you're done. Now for me, I did run out of one of my skeins before I reached the end, so I left a little bit of an end that I can weave in for that piece that wasn't going to make it to the end, and I finished with just the 1 skein of yarn. So yes, there were a lot of imperfections here. If I had finished up earlier, if I hadn't wanted to eke out as much as I could from these skeins of yarn, then this would be neater and I would have finished with 2 stitches to the edge. It's not that easy to tell that I only have 1 piece of yarn at the very end of this binding off, plus we're going to be putting the fringe through it, so I really don't think it's very noticeable. Now for all of the bits of yarn from when we started new skeins, we need to weave them in, and we want to weave them in on the back of the work. So if you have any that are still left on the front, just poke them through so they're on the back. And what I do is I try to get to where we can see the purl stitches on the back. So for some, they're in the knit stitches, and I just used my needle to move them closer to the purl stitch. I'm going to show a little bit of weaving in here slowed down so you can see the technique that I think is the correct technique. Basically, I follow those curves. So I go over a curve and then down and then under a curve and then up. And when you go up and down, you go diagonally so that you're going through some stitching that you've been through before. once you've woven in all of the ends, then you can attach the fringe. And so for the fringe, I just went through each of those stitches at the bottom, so either where we bound off on one end or where we cast on the other end, and just fold your piece of yarn in half and pull the middle of it through, and then pull the two ends through that loop. Very simple. And this is called a lark's head. So just do that for each of the stitches on both ends to get your fringe. Now finally, you may wish to block your work. I did block this, I didn't block it very aggressively. And blocking is just when we get the piece wet and reshape it. And you can shape it quite a lot when it's wet. It gets quite stretchy. So mine was just bunched up a little bit, I guess just from being knit, I don't know. So I didn't want to soak the whole thing, but that is one way that you can block your work. Soak it and then lay it out to dry and shape it when you lay it out, and then when it dries it's in the shape that you want. But I thought that I would rather just sort of steam it a little bit, so I just sprayed it with some water and put a press cloth over it and then ironed it. So I did shape it, spray it with water, now it's very pliable, I shaped it and then ironed it. And this probably wasn't as good as when you soak your piece to block it. I wasn't very patient with it, so I sort of shaped it as much as I felt like shaping it. But it gets a lot flatter, larger, and straighter when you do this. And that's it. Here's the finished table runner.
So what did you think of our knit table runner or scarf? I'm really happy with the project. I realized that this is the sort of project that a Fair Isle preschooler could probably knock off at recess, but for me, being a beginning knitter, I'm really pleased with the way this came out and the way it looks on my table. I would love to know your thoughts in the comments, and I'd love to know whether you knitted it or if you knitted a variation of it or maybe a different color, something like that. I would just love to hear about it. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. That tells me that you enjoy this sort of content and I should bring you more. And if you like this sort of content, please subscribe to Crafts the Charm. Thank you for spending time with me today. Take care.